Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Volume 17, Chapter 5, and that has got to be the most anticlimactic reveal I've ever seen in this series. Honestly, this, random popping up, oh yeah, by the way, this happened. And it's like, okay, I mean, I like it. What I'm talking about is the reveal of the man god at the end of chapter 6, which we'll get into. But I'm hoping we'll get into. I don't see any reason why we won't. But yeah, it was just one of those moments where it's like it solidifies my like of this series that Rudeus doesn't have to be involved in everything. Like, he doesn't have to solve everything. And Ariel is definitely, in these two chapters, solving a lot of stuff. Rudeus could not ask for a better ally in this whole situation than literally the one that's at the center of the whole situation. Let's be honest. But it's still like one of those, okay, I guess that's a thing. I still have my suspicions, but still, it was kind of like, okay, we're doing this. Shrug, I guess. It's a thing. Moving on. But anyways, as per usual, thank you so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Thanks to everybody that checks out the video afterwards. I do like the people that check out things after the premiere. It's not that I'm singling you guys out, that you're not special, but greatly appreciate everybody that supports what we're doing here. It's so fantastic, the support you guys given me, the kind words, the support you've given me. I don't know if I said that right. The support you have been giving me. Just sometimes it just kind of all blurs together. And sometimes I cut it out, but sometimes I leave it just for the sake of laughs. But anyways, yes, everybody that supports the channel through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, all that stuff, it means so much to me. Last week, we had a fantastic super chat given over by Abraham. Thank you so much for that. That is just, it means the world to me. And as per usual, Noah, Nicholas, you guys are great. And all the members of the channel, you're fantastic. With all that said, let's dive into Chapter 5, Tristina. It's finally time. Triss is finally joining the party. Making their way to the bandits' territory, Rudy started to assume that Auber was waiting for them at the checkpoint as they weren't followed. The man god would have anticipated their strategy, but Rudeus had the bracelet from Orsted. It prevented the man god from foreseeing any chances caused directly by his actions. He could figure it out if he remembered the details in the description of the diary from the future. But Orsted said the man god had been too reliant on his foresight for so long that he wasn't much good at speculating about the future. It's like that idea that you don't use that muscle too much, do you? And so after a while, you just get a little bit too weak there. He also didn't seem to memorize every little detail that people told him, so it was unlikely that he recalled minor details from his diary at this point. Yeah, that is a good point, because yes, technically everything that Orsted's doing right now is sort of based on his memory and based on what was in that diary. He's going, okay, this diary says that Ariel's going to fall. We got to prevent that from happening, because that's not what my future sees. And my future had all these things applied to it that sort of correlate with what's in that future diary. Whereas from the man god's perspective, he's just going based on what his power is doing, and he doesn't think much for himself outside of that, is what they're sort of implying here. Or that could all be a part of his plan, all according to Keikaku right here. Suddenly, Rudeus felt the direction of the wind shift. Stop. Ghislaine grabbed his shoulder. They're here. Edis went to step forward, but Rudeus stopped her. Her negotiating skills would include fists. She backed down easily enough, but he noticed her looking off to the sides, not forward. They have us surrounded. What now? We still have a chance to break through. Don't you remember the plan? I'm going to negotiate with them. Right. I'll guard the princess then. Ghislaine dropped to the rear before quietly discussing something with Sylphie and the others. Ariel caught his eye, who gave a meaningful nod. So far, Ariel was acting as if the previous night never happened. She'd be handling Luke and the Osprey nobility, but he had no idea what she had in mind. He had noticed her quietly talking to Luke as they were walking, though. As Rudeus waited for the bandits to call out to them, Edis gave a humph as she gazed restlessly around. Dark shapes would move between the trees now and then, and she seemed to be watching them. It seemed that she was sticking close to Rudeus ever since the ambush the previous day. Auber had popped up right behind him, so maybe she was worried that something might happen again. That is a very good point. I didn't really think about that during the ambush. But for somebody like Edis right now, who is so ingrained in her mind right now that she is the one that's supposed to protect Rudeus. The other two wives have basically established, you are the protector. Protect Rudeus. You are much more physically strong than we are, much more physically capable. Please protect Rudeus. That is your role in this family. You are the protecting husband, basically. And so after that situation where she was in the front lines, she was fighting, she was doing a great job. She's just hacking down people left and right. But despite how well she was doing, Rudeus had to defend himself. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't actually bring it up in this whole thing. She failed to protect him. And I bet that probably angered her. I have a feeling, and that was probably possibly why she was so, She turned and quickly bit at him the moment he came by. She probably... I think the next time she runs an Auber, Auber dead. I have a feeling that Auber dead. Somebody put my husband in danger. Somebody put Rudius in danger. I will slice them in half without even blinking. That's a dumb way of putting it. In a blink of an eye. After a minute or two, Edis's gaze stopped. It seemed they stopped encircling their group. Edis whispered, "There's about 5 of them or so, I think. We can handle it." She had picked up an enemy radar skill at some point. Up ahead, a man pushed through into the open. Others showed themselves as well, behind trees and on branches. Rudius thought, "Edis, honey, there's like 20 of them at least." That estimation was a little bit on the low side, don't you think? Edis avoided Rudius's gaze. We had quite an interesting discussion in the Discord about the whole thing with Edis and her ability to sort of sense people. And yes, technically way back in the Edis the Goblin Slaying chapter, it mentioned the idea that at some point she told Cliff to be quiet and that she was heightening her senses because she was trying to hear what was going on around them, where everything's at. And I believe what they kind of indicate there is that, yes, Rugerd had trained her in heightening her senses. I don't think it's... What I'm kind of assuming it is where she's kind of increasing how she can hear. Like, she's focusing on what she hears, basically. It's a standard warrior skill. It's sort of similar to Ellen Elise. Ellen Elise had the ability to hear things, and that's how she was guiding Rudius through the forest, because she can hear the monsters themselves. And additionally, yes, because she was an elf, she was better at kind of navigating a forest. So I think that's kind of what they're insinuating her skill is. I don't think it's something like a, sensing mana or something like that typically you get from a demon eye or something like that, because that is sort of what is special about those. If anybody could sense mana, the flow of mana, then what's the good of a demon eye? So I think the demon eye is a special thing. As for what Rugerd was able to do, it was his third eye, obviously, and I think they describe that as being sort of like a radar. And I've always kind of wondered, what exactly is that? Is it like he sees through that eye and suddenly he sees like maybe like an overhead view of everything? Is it a thing where he kind of senses the distance of living things, and it's not necessarily hearing or smelling, it's just literally seeing it and knowing where it's at? It's kind of an interesting thought process there, but this sort of kind of proves that despite the fact that she's very skilled seemingly at hearing and sensing where people are at based on her, sight, sound, and smell, it's not perfect. But that's not a negative to Edis, so to speak. It's more of an aspect that's a positive to the bandits. These bandits have been doing this for a long time. They know how to hide themselves. So if Edis walks in here and suddenly goes, yes, there's 20 of them, there's exactly 20 of them, it kind of gives you an indication these people don't know what they're doing. These are bandits that have been doing this for their lifetime. This is their life. They know these forests and how to hide themselves. The man in front of them had a stubbly beard, fur vest, and a machete at his hip.
What says the echo in reply?
Rabbit entrails, and the chirping of the thrush. Rudius was told by Orsted the code words in advance. The man had asked what their business was. Rudius told them they wanted to cross the border and speak to one of their members. There was all sorts of codes. Nurturing fox was human trafficking. A feline errand was to have someone in Osra located. A wakened bear was to arrange someone to disappear in the red worm's whiskers. Anyone not knowing these codes would end up robbed or dead. That's kind of one of those weird things, because it's sort of implying this idea that the only business they do with people is if they know these code words. And it's like, well, wouldn't they be open to really anybody? Because it's like, if you don't know, then you can't gain their services, unless it's like they have enough business just from exclusivity, like certain people of high power to get moved here or there. People that would have money, essentially. Just your random Joe Schmo is not going to have the money they're looking for to do some deeds that are probably going to be very questionable.
The hell? What's the thrush's chick?
The striped acorn. This was a code name for Triss. The bandit was confused, but then shrugged and raised his hand. The others melted away quietly in the forest.
Follow me.
Rudius signaled okay to the others. Ariel seemed to exhale in relief. Rudius then noticed Edis's eyes sparkling with excitement. That was awesome, Rudius! He wasn't sure what was so awesome about knowing a couple of code words. Their party followed the bandit closely. They were brought to a lone cabin in the middle of the woods. Interior was large enough for a living room, bedroom, and storage space. The bandit took payment from Rudius before explaining things. We'll bring the thrust to you. The crossing's tomorrow at dawn. Deal's off if you wander off before then. He walked off into the woods without waiting for a response. Hopefully, he was getting Triss for them. He hadn't asked for any details about their plan. But in this line of work, you probably didn't pry as long as someone paid up. Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't want to know. I don't want to know why you're going in there. I don't know why you want to get out. I don't know why you want somebody killed. Just pay the money, and it gets done. I think the least they know, the better. After settling down, Rudius explained their plans. They would slip over the border bright and early in the morning, with a woman they'd be meeting soon as their guide. Until then, they'd rest. I don't know why he is. This is kind of an interesting thing. When I read this right here, I'm like, what makes you think that she'd be your guide? Like, yes, you're asking to see her, but it's not like they go, yeah, it looks like you're going to be the guy because they're asking for you. It was simply that he wanted to see her, like bring her to us so that we can talk to her. But whatever. Granted, what she thought she was coming there for was completely different. Luke spoke up. I suppose we'll have to pray that they don't hand us over to Darius' forces in the morning. Reese had similar feelings. Things were going so smoothly that it seemed like they were overdue for trouble. But that wasn't really a logical line of thought. Ariel then spoke up playfully. My ambitions are shattered, and I'm reduced to a plaything for bandits. How dreadful. Rudius, I hope that you be kind enough to let Cleone and Elmoy go free, at least. Rudius thought, ugh. You know very well what was going to happen next, Princess. Come on now. You got those two staring daggers at me. What did I do to deserve this slander? So great. In any case, it seems that we have a roof overhead for the night. I imagine our journey across the border won't be easy, so let's make sure that we get plenty of rest while we can. As our two attendants massaged Ariel's legs, Luke kept an eye out the window, shooting glances at Rudius now and then. He was clearly still suspicious of him, maybe told by the man god there was an enemy amongst their party. But Rudius was a man god's enemy, not Luke's. So he's basically telling the truth to Luke. Ghislaine took her usual spot in the corner of the room. She nodded to Rudius slightly when he glanced at her. Sylphie left to clean the bedroom, and Edis smirked as she cleaned her equipment. Rudius wondered what was up with that weird glow that the blade was emitting. Still, they were lucky that she was on their side. She's over there just smirking. She's probably happy that she's got to, like, cross the border. She's hanging out with bandits, all this adventure stuff. She's just having, like, a grand time. After 2 hours, rain began to fall. Ariel went to sleep in the bedroom, accompanied by Elmoy. Luke stood guard outside her door. Ghislaine remained in the corner. As for Sylphie, Edis, and Cleone, they discussed something in the corner of the room in hushed voices. Sylphie and Cleone giggled every now and then, so it probably wasn't a serious conversation. At some point, Ghislaine's ears twitched, and Edis spoke up, warning that someone was outside. The both of them stood ready, hand at the hilt of their sword. Then, a knock came at the door. Reese nodded to Ghislaine, who opened the door. A hooded woman stepped inside. She wore a thick cloak of water-resistant monster hide, but it was easy to tell that she was, well, voluptuous. It's like the first impressions for Rudius is, yeah, gotta size her up. Gotta immediately size her up. Yep, her chest looks like it might be bigger than Edis's. Let me see. Where's my measuring tape? I gotta find out if she's bigger than Edis. Hell, couldn't you idiots have opened a little faster? She muttered her curses as she pulled off her cloak. She had light brown hair, typical in Asra, and wore revealing clothing, less typical. Okay, so, which one of you wants to see me? I assume some moron wants to try to buy me for the night, but it looks like it ain't it. Spit it out. I'm a busy woman. She spoke so loud and intensely that her voice seemed to fill the cabin. Edis grimaced, and Cleone glared reproachfully. Sylphie then spoke up. I'm sorry, but we got someone asleep in the back. Would you mind lowering your voice? She just gets so mad about people being loud when somebody's sleeping. What the hell? You call me out here in the pouring rain, and all you gotta say is lower your voice? Are you people f***ing with me? They call me Triss the Hasty for a goddamn reason. You know that? Reese expected Triss to be a little more softer spoken. Unfortunately, they seem to have gotten off on the wrong foot. The diary said that she had treated future Rudius with a lot of respect. But that was only because he had stolen Mills Church's most sacred texts. Thankfully, he worked up a plan with Orsted in advance. Ugh, god damn it. What a joke. Look, I'm in a bad mood right now. I lost at dice, and Donovan rubbed it in my face for hours. This new slave girl spat in my goddamn face, and then I had to run out here in the rain. Tell me what you want right now, or I'm leaving. I'm not in a good mood for more crap today, alright? Better luck next time. She's pissed. She's pissed. Most of that wasn't even their fault, Rudius thought. Rudius wanted to get to the point, but he needed to calm her down first. As Rudius was trying to find the right words, Luke stepped up smoothly and took her by the hand. He wiped the water from her forehead with his handkerchief. Our sincerest apologies for the abrupt summons, miss. Please forgive us if you can. We know your time is precious, but we only ask that you consider what we have to say. Rudius thought that felt seriously fake, but Trista stared at Luke with her mouth hanging open. A blush spread across her face, and she lowered her gaze from his. Oh, well, if you say so, I guess I can hear you out at least. Okay, Luke's finally good for something. I do like the fact that he really didn't hesitate. Just stepped right up there and kind of diffused the situation. So, like, a rare win, like, props to Luke moment right here. A rare W for him. Like, this isn't his idea. This whole situation is not Luke's idea. He doesn't like they're there. He thinks this is a bad idea, bad plan. They're going to get killed. But he still stepped forward because he knows Triss is part of what they're doing here, and he needs to defuse it. So, again, Rare W for him. Somehow, it actually worked. Never underestimate the power of a pretty face. Luke shot a meaningful glance at Rudius. The rest was up to him now. Hey, before we talk, would you mind, telling me your name? I'm Luke. Luke chose to omit his family name entirely. He then stepped back into the group without a word. Trish mumbled his name to herself with a dreamy expression. No, it seemed like suspicion on her face. It looked like the name rang a bell. And that would make sense. If she was technically Darius's plaything, she probably overheard people talking and at some point probably learned about Luke, or possibly, because we'll find out here in a minute, she knows Ariel. There's a possibility that through proxy, she knows about Luke. It just depends on when Luke came out of the service of Ariel. If she knew Triss before then it wouldn't be the case. But she probably overheard names. Or she's working for the Man God. Or she's working for the Man God. It's a pleasure to meet you, Triss. Reese offered his best and brightest smile. Who the hell are you? Her face turned a scowl. like she was looking at a shady door-to-door salesman. He apparently wasn't good at this whole smiling thing. He'd have to have Aisha train him. My name's Rudius. Rudius bowed as she looked him over. Rudius? I felt like I've heard that name before. Wait a second. Are you Quagmire? She heard of him all the way out here? What's the most vicious mage of the magic city of Shariah doing all the way out here? Vicious, Rudius thought. What kind of rumors were going around him exactly? As he scrambled for a reply, they were interrupted by a sharp metallic ting. I forgot about this. Ting. Ting. Trish shut her mouth instantly, and the skin on Rudius's back began to crawl. Ting. Ting. Looking in the direction of the sound, Edis stood in the corner of the room, eyes cold and focused, clicking her finger against the pommel of her sword. It was something like a warning, or maybe a sign of her displeasure. Sorry. Trish's shoulders were quivering. I'm not trying to pry on your business or anything, okay? Edis acknowledged the apology, and with a quiet snort, before stopping her flicking. The girl was scary sometimes. That's so good. Like, yeah, shut your mouth. You better shut your mouth. All we need to do is a growl, and the tinging is basically a growl. It's just you need information to survive in this kind of work. We know the names and faces of most, well, dangerous people. I'm not really that dangerous, for the record. Yeah, sure. Don't worry. I get it. You're just some random guy named Rudius. Not the famous mage, right? That lady over there isn't the Berserker Sword King. And that beastfolk woman over there isn't the Black Wolf. Sound good? Yeah, let's go with that. She literally just called out really everybody. And if Ariel was in the room, she totally probably, I don't know, it seems like she wasn't really sure it was Ariel, but still. Giving his real name may have been a mistake. She even knew about Edis, though. There was a chance that she might be the apostle of the Man God. Seven C's. We're back to apostles, people. After so many volumes, 11 volumes of it being apostles, they randomly change it at the beginning of this to disciples, and then 5 chapters in, we're back to apostles. So I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. Consistency is important sometimes. No, it was unlikely. She probably heard rumors of Quagmire Rudius working with the Black Wolf and Berserker Sword King. He couldn't jump to blaming the Man God for everything he couldn't understand. It would throw off his judgment. It's actually a really good point. Like, he's realizing at this point, I gotta stop that. Like, it is the joke about the Man Gods living rent-free in Rudius's head, but there is mistakes that you can make based on that. The reason why, and he kind of puts it here, the reason why that's a really bad thing for him to get into in the mindset-wise, yes, it's important to always be on guard that this person could be working for the Man God, and thus whatever they say would be a lie, and they're working to take me down. But the problem that comes from that is you don't think about the broader picture. If your conclusion is always, it's got to be the Man God, then you're never giving thought to what actually might be fueling them. Okay, this person's betraying me. Got to be the Man God. Rather than going, okay, why is this person betraying me? Look at the details. Look at the what sort of evidence we have, and you can find out that it's actually Billy over here. But because you immediately say it's a Man God, you'll never think about Billy, and then Billy can do it again. So it is definitely a good mindset to not get into, or it's a bad mindset to get into, and it's good to think about that. All right then, random Rudius. Mind telling me what your business is with Triss the border-hopping thug? In the long run, he had to get Triss to expose Darius's misdeeds and take him down. He couldn't start by asking her if she was Tristina Purplehorse, and a former Osran noble. She knew how vicious Osran politics were. They could explain their situation, but if she didn't see any chance of victory, she wouldn't get involved. It's a very good point, because even when Ariel kind of steps up here in a minute, it kind of turns into one of those things where, despite the fact that it seems like she has trust in Ariel and respects Ariel, it's not as if it's like it's a pass. Like, she still had to fight to get her trust. It had to be one step at a time. Make friends with her, travel south, drop hints about defeating Darius, mentioning how helpful it would be to damage his reputation. See if she volunteers, and if not, pressure to help them out. Sounds like it actually, despite the fact that Ariel basically kind of just click does it, it is actually a good plan there. While I contemplated this, someone spoke up from the back of the room. Excuse me, are you, by any chance, Tristina Purplehorse? Triss stared across the room at Ariel with eyes wide with surprise. Why do you know that name? Oh, it's really you. Do you remember me? The two of us met just once, at my 5th birthday party. Princess Ariel? For a long moment, Triss studied Ariel's features, perhaps comparing her to her memories. Yeah, that's a long time ago. That is actually a very long time ago. But somebody like Princess Ariel, even at like 5, probably was somebody that would probably burn into your eyes. And especially since like what all she's gone through, it's that idea that this is so different than the rest of her life has been. You can kind of see that being something that would kind of solidify in her mind as something very unique that she wouldn't want to forget. What are you doing here, Your Highness? Her legs trembling, Triss kneeled on the wooden floor. Ariel approached her and stood before her. I received word that my father is deathly ill and attempted to return to Asra, but it seems my elder brother isn't in an especially welcoming mood. That's a good way to put it. That's one way to put it. Rudius thought if this was a good idea to throw out there. This was much more open than something Rudius would do. He opted for more sneaky and careful moves, but this kind of openness was probably the best way to earn her trust. Oh, I get it. So that's why you came to us, to smuggle you across the border. Triss nodded thoughtfully. She must have heard about the recent battle in the forest. Yeah, I can totally see the bandits knowing about that. I mean, they probably have people scouting all about, and it's something you probably wouldn't miss, especially with like this random mudstorm appearing out of nowhere. Of course, they probably knew they were there, stationed there, waiting for Rudius and Party to arrive. Like the whole time they were probably watching them, because they probably were there for a while. But what about you, Tristina? What are you doing in a place like this? The last I heard, you gone missing without a trace. Triss hesitated, looked at Ariel's eyes, then spoke. It's a long story, but things moved along quickly and easily. Triss poured out her entire miserable life story to Ariel, like a sinner at a confession. Darius kidnapped her at a young age, used her body as a toy for years. Eventually, he sold her to the bandits, where she was the leader's woman, and he trained her as a bandit on a whim. Then, when the new boss took over, she gained her freedom as a member of the band. There was all sorts of struggles and ugly details in the story, but Triss told it calmly, without tears or smiles. Princess Ariel, on the other hand, was crying openly for most of it. Her tears looked absolutely genuine, and as the last of them fell, she made a promise to Triss. I can't truly understand your suffering, but I guarantee I'll give the man who did this to you rightful punishment. I can't even imagine that. But it does technically make sense, I guess, from the perspective of Triss. This is something that she has lived with for so long. It's probably hardened her a lot. I mean, yes, it's painful. Yes, she has gone through some really crappy stuff, and it hurt her. But I think they're kind of giving that contrast of that she's lived it for so long, it has become her life. And yes, technically in response, Ariel, it's heartbreaking. She can't even imagine it. So I do think that tears are probably genuine. It seems like Ariel has become more and more of a empathetic person. Ariel then asked Triss to help them by testifying to what Darius had done to her. A truly remarkable, convincing act. However, Triss was hesitant to agree. The king of Asra was very powerful, and Darius was a sly and vicious man. Triss insisted that they stood no chance of victory, but Ariel claimed that wasn't true. Ariel named her allies: Sylphie, Edis, Ghislaine, Rudius, and Pedagoose himself. I'm surprised she didn't slip out, and a dragon god. And the dragon god is backing us. But yeah, she doesn't want to reveal that. No, but I would actually put it in the idea of, like, I would say, and the dragon god Orsted. And then when anybody else asks, I would say, well, Rudius is technically working for him, so I have no doubt that he can use Orsted. That would be a sly way of bringing Orsted in the picture without her admitting that she is working for him. But technically, we don't know if Triss has ever met Orsted. So that might actually be a very bad thing. If Triss sometime in the past maybe has met Orsted, she would no longer trust Ariel right here. After agonizing over her decision for an hour, Triss finally nodded, swearing an oath right then and there to escort Ariel safely to the capital and help bring down Darius. Ariel gained another loyal follower in no time at all, using her earnest words and skillful arguments to win over Triss' heart and soul. This was a goal Rudius and Orsted talked over, but they hadn't come up with a detailed plan to achieve it. That's very interesting. It kind of seemed, I mean, Rudius earlier technically did lay out what his plan was. It was we're going to go south, we're going to travel together, we're going to become friends, and then we're going to like hint at the fact that we're going to need to take down this Darius guy, and that we so badly, gosh, it would be so great if, I heard that Darius used to have all these playthings. He's a disgusting dude, had all these playthings, would then sell them off afterwards. If we can find somebody like that, I bet we could totally take him down. If only. So it's like she's over there like writing down like their next route and whatnot on a map, and Rudius is over here with Ariel going, if only someone had some first-hand experience with that. She's over there just like, stop it. It's great though. Ariel, she's good. She's so good. I mean, that goes to her charisma and her ability to win people over. But I think there's I guess it's a very interesting thing here. I didn't really realize this until now. This whole moment here, Rudius never said her voice is so enchanting. The way that she speaks, I couldn't help but not listen. We've had so many times before, especially during the entire like academy arc or the university arc. It was so much emphasis on every time Ariel would speak, he would be like, it just enchants my ears. I can't help it. It just tickles my ears. And he said it sometimes after that, and I think here recently he did. But in this conversation with Triss, Rudius never mentions how Ariel, her words are just so enchanting. I think what it's trying to, it's almost as if maybe it's just like a forgetting to kind of get into that or not wanting to get into it because it's repetitive. But it could be also a thing of wanting to make sure this implied here is Ariel, by her words and her way of speaking and her skillful arguments, won Triss over. I think it's kind of interesting to kind of note. But yeah, it is kind of sad to hear that Orsted and Rudius didn't even really have a plan. They didn't really have a plan for this. Not that Orsted would kind of lay out some long thing, but if Triss is that important, you would think that they would come up with something, like some way of convincing her. And I would assume that would be through Orsted knowing something about Triss that would technically impact her and gain her trust. But, oh well. Ariel probably just sprung into action when she's seen how slow and clunky Rudius's plans were. The princess was one seriously impressive woman. No wonder she was so confident that she could win over an entire Osran nobility on her own. Rudius would just have to focus on things that only he could do. That's good. I mean, that's the whole... This is something that Rudius needs to learn right now. Rudius keeps holding everything for himself. I'll handle everything because I can't rely on other people. And then there's a brief moment where he does rely on other people. But then there's like this whole thing that comes in called Orsted that causes people to not be able to trust the situation. And then he had to go back to like being all about himself. And then, like I said last Mushoku Monday, it's got to be so great to finally be able to go, thank you. Now I can actually have Ariel handle this side of things. I don't have to constantly be worrying about what this side of it is. Again, the nobility and Luke and all that kind of stuff. And here with Triss, it's probably massively relieving. Chapter 6, on the road. On the road again. Anyways, early the next morning, they set out from the cabin. Okay then, follow me. Triss led them deeper into the forest. Without the sun, it was hard to tell which direction they were going, but the ground slanted upwards before them. The forest was so dense here, and seemed to go on forever. But then they pushed through one last dense patch of brush to find a sizable lake. Its sides were surrounded by tall cliffs and forest. Its surface a brilliant shade of blue. It didn't seem part of the river system, so maybe the water came from underground. This wasn't even on our map. Yeah, it's a position so that you can't see it from a distance. And this is all our turf, so you won't see it on any maps. They followed the curve of the lake to a cliff on the far side. A single stone tablet stood on the ground nearby. When Triss performed some sort of incantation in front of it, part of the cliff melted away, and a cave appeared before their eyes. This way. It's easy to slip and fall here, so watch your step. Leading the way again, she stepped carefully into the lake, which continued into the cliffside cave. Come on, Rudius, let's go. Edis's eyes sparkled with excitement. Even at 20, she hadn't lost her enthusiasm for adventure, itching to explore this hidden cavern. Rudius wasn't much better in his own way. He'd never grown out of his love for used Ponsu. Just don't move so fast the horse will slip in the water, okay? Yeah, I know. Her smile suggests his warning went in one ear and out the other. she hopped in and pulled Masakaze alone, who was pulled through reluctantly. I didn't even know they had Masakaze with them. I guess it makes sense that they brought Masakaze because he's like a really good horse, but it was kind of odd that we didn't even mention anything about him until like right here. But yeah, this is interesting because it makes sense that like you have this area, this massive forest area, and then you have like this checkpoint. It's like a choke point. And so how would you smuggle people through? And that was kind of the question mark that I had for the longest time. Is like, it's either got to be a cave that goes through there, or maybe like there is this one trail that goes up the mountainside over here. Maybe it's a little bit hard to do, but nobody ever knew about it because the bandits have this area as a territory. Again, it makes sense because beyond the checkpoint, beyond that chokehold, it's not like they have soldiers just spread throughout this forest. They don't maintain the forest. It's full of monsters because it's just let to be as it is. And that's part of the reason why this checkpoint is here, is to prevent those monsters from coming through. And there's no indication that they're constantly monitoring this entire area. So, yeah, you have the bandits are there. It's their turf. They control it. And they don't let people find certain areas like this. And additionally, as it suggests, also they're using some sort of magic, a stone tablet, to hide a path. It kind of makes me wonder if there's a possibility that this cavern they go into was something that was created. Rudius kind of suggests that it might be dwarves, which, yes, that makes perfect sense. The idea that at some point dwarves were living there, maybe before this catastrophe happened and the war all happened that kind of spread everybody out and moved civilizations to different locations. Maybe there was dwarves over here at some point living here and digging tunnels. But I guess the question marks more for me is, who hid the tunnel? Like, why is this tunnel hidden? Who has that capability? Do these bandits actually have that, or did they discover this tablet and this path at some point and just figured out what the incantation is, and that's when they started using it? I'd be curious as to exactly who hid the tunnel. I think is a bigger question mark for me, because the only real case that we have of somebody else using a tablet like that, though Rudius doesn't describe it the same way, is the dragonfolk. Sylphie then spoke up. We should try to keep up, Rudy. Right. They entered the cave in single file. It led upwards, allowing them to get out of the water. All right, then. Follow me, and try not to fall too far behind. You don't want to get lost in here. Trust me. Are you speaking by experience? It could be the idea that, they've had people that were supposed to be smuggled, and they got lost, and never found. So it kind of implies the idea that, yeah, if you get lost in here, you're gone. And we've had some people that are gone. But additionally, yes, as she kind of mentioned here in a minute, if you go down the wrong path, if you're lost, you go down the wrong path, you might end up walking right out to where the red worms are and gone. Rhea summoned a lamplight spirit before noticing Ariel contemplating her drenched pants with a troubled expression. He let her know that they could dry him out later, which she agreed, somehow managing a cheerful smile. I didn't know she was so picky about her outfit. I guess it's more of the idea that she wants to make sure that she's always presentable. You never know who you might run into. Plus, it's probably not comfortable. Last night, most of the party had convinced themselves that it was pure coincidence that Triss and Ariel knew each other. They were all very impressed with how Ariel had won over her on the spur of the moment. Well, one exception was Edis, who got cranky about everybody admiring Ariel. She's like, don't do that. You're pulling away attention from Rudius. Rudius could have handled it. Rudius could have handled it. That's probably why she's mad. Like, Rudius could totally have handled that Triss person, and this Ariel showed up. That aside, Rudius was happy to have the princess at his side now. It seemed that she was serious about supporting Rudius. While studying Ariel's face for a long moment, Sylphie spoke up. Sylphie getting jealous again. Rudy, what is it, Sylphie, my beloved wife? Don't stare at Princess Ariel too much, or I'm gonna pull your ears. Understood, dear. You want me to stare at you constantly, correct? She yanked his ear. You still got your... Like, she literally said, don't stare at Ariel, or I'm going to pull your ears. Okay, I'll stare at you. Pulls his ear. Like, come on, you're never happy. You're never happy. For some reason, Sylphie seemed opposed to him getting too friendly with Princess Ariel. She hadn't objected to marrying Roxy or Edis, but Ariel seemed to be a different category. He seemed to remember her saying Nanahoshi might be okay too. I don't remember that. I know that she, when it came to the subject of it, she's like, the few times that we had, it's obviously showed that she was distrusting of Nanahoshi, and the assumption there was because Rudius has some sort of connection with Nanahoshi that he doesn't have with her. Like, there was a jealousy there. But yes, later on, she teased him about Nanahoshi, and that kind of affected him. Like, I gotta stop being around Nanahoshi, I gotta stop going there and seeing her because this is affecting my relationship with Sylphie. But I don't for some reason remember her ever saying it might be okay. Now, yes, during this whole period of time, she's expressed several times that she's okay with him getting with somebody as long as they love each other. Bring them to me, and I want to see that you love each other. In the case of Nanahoshi, she always had this feeling like she didn't see that love from Nanahoshi. And so she wasn't okay with it. But yeah, Ariel is a completely different animal in a lot of ways from the perspective of Sylvie. And the idea that she has, from those moments in the university arc, it was a lot to do with the fact that she didn't want Rudius to be enchanted by Ariel. And I think that might be where it ends up going here, is the idea that Sylvie doesn't like the idea of the relationship between Rudius and Ariel because she knows that Ariel can enchant people. And thus, that could be an aspect there of, if Rudius suddenly comes to Sylvie and says, I want to marry Ariel, Sylvie, it would be hard for her to accept because there's a chance that Rudius is just enchanted by her words. She's seen so many enchanted by her words. And it's kind of a lie. She's admitted the idea that it just seems like it's a lie. And she didn't want Rudius to be enchanted as well and bow before her by her words. Or it could be other things. It could be possibly the idea that she might see that Ariel has too good of a body compared to her, but that's something that she's come to grips with someone like Edis. Edis has a much more curvier figure than her and much more bustier, so I don't think that's the case. I think it's just more in the idea that she doesn't want Rudius enchanted and tricked by Ariel. Or maybe this will be one of those rare moments where Sylvie does not want Rudius tied in with that royal family and the politics and everything. It might be, because I mean, that was one argument that I made way long time ago when Rudius first announced that he was going to marry Sylvie. I didn't like the idea that she didn't tell Rudius, don't get involved with Ariel because of this conflict that's coming up. Now we're here. Now we're here. But it was still like something back then that I was a little bit frustrated that she didn't say, stay away from Ariel. She's going to get you involved in all these politics. It might actually be true. That might be the case here, that she doesn't want him to get connected with Ariel because that would make Rudius get tied in with all this stuff. And it might not be so much her not wanting to have him get involved with a conflict. It might actually be more in the idea that she doesn't want Rudius to get involved with something that she knows that he doesn't like. She may very well know that Rudius does not like these politics, does not like these nobles, and doesn't want to get involved in this conflict. And getting involved with Ariel will get him involved with that. Anyways, that's a lot of different maybes. Maybes and speculations, because we waste our perspective chapters of the girls talking about Rudius and not actually about what his relationships are. It was hard to tell exactly what counted as cheating in Sylvie's mind. In retaliation, he licked the back of her ear. It wasn't obvious before, but the cavern was neatly tiled, meaning this tunnel was man-made. It gets really twisty and complicated from here on in, so stay real close. Keep alert too. We don't get many monsters in here, but sometimes they wander in from deeper tunnels. Oh, and don't go wandering outside if you see any light in the distance. We're in the Wedworm's territory now. There was that implication of the idea that, yeah, walk towards the light, walk out there, and Wedworm. At this point, the tunnel had a high ceiling, and it was relatively wide. As Trish said, it was constantly curving and had many branching paths. It was like a giant man-made maze. This place is really amazing, Rudy. It isn't some kind of labyrinth, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it isn't. How do you think they made such huge tunnels through the mountains? Well, the Redworms took over this area 400 years ago. Maybe there was some dwarves living around here until then or something. Oh, that makes sense. I guess these might really be old mining tunnels then. Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting little drop of some lore out of Rudius out of nowhere. Like, by the way, they took over at some point 400 years ago and just took over the entire area. Which, yeah, is kind of very interesting in that regard, is the Red Worms is kind of taking this land as their own. And yes, a lot of that can be because that split that kind of happened and forcing, again, civilizations and monsters too, to have to kind of find new places to be. But yeah, I can kind of see it being possibly dwarven made, because if it was a labyrinth, it would make sense why it would have like tiles and stuff on the floor. Now, granted, we haven't seen a labyrinth that is made by the monsters that is not kept by somebody to having some sort of tiling or something in it. There could be dungeons, there could be labyrinths, specifically labyrinths. There could be labyrinths that actually have, tiles and stuff and nicely kept walls and stuff. Yes, technically with the library labyrinth, that was being kept by the Demon King. He was wanting it, built in a certain way, and so he had all these creatures, these minions that were going around and building it the way that he wanted it. But that's not to say that it has to all be built by monsters and thus not have any sort of structure or bricks and stuff kind of laying it out. Again, with the whole situation in Begaret with the teleportation labyrinth, pretty much our only example besides the library labyrinth of a labyrinth, yeah, it was kind of implied the idea that they were all created by initially these monsters, these ants kind of digging down in the ground, but additionally it slowly kind of merging with a teleportation ruins, and thus it had that structure and the teleportation circles and whatnot sort of seep into it. Magically or by the monsters is the question mark. I love there's still so much mystery around how this stuff works, despite the fact that, especially with the teleportation labyrinth, they got so much into how those are kind of structured and built. Up ahead, Edis poked curiously into one strange side passage after another, only to get dragged back by Ghislaine. Go back here. Stop it. No, stop it. Just constantly dragging her back over. I get mental images of Rijerd holding Edis up and she's kicking around. No, I want to go this way. It seems spending the last night under a roof had relaxed them a little bit. By the way, Rudy. Sorry, it's nothing. Sylphie went silent, shooting a glance over her shoulder. Ariel, Luke, and her tenants were following at a decent distance, their formation feeling kind of loose and probably too spread out. While it didn't seem like monsters were lurking here, the last thing he needed was for the princess to get lost. Yeah, that would be not good. Yeah, I like how he's kind of pointing out the idea that because they had a relaxing time in an actual cabin, even though it was dirty and everything like that, which he could have easily cleaned it. He's done that before with a lot of the inns that he stayed at. But it's kind of nice to kind of point out that everybody kind of had a moment to chill. They weren't constantly having to look at every direction. They were able to kind of be in a secluded area where they could possibly defend themselves if needed and get some decent rest with, not the insects and creatures of the outside keeping you up. But I am kind of curious as to this little comment because it kind of comes out of nowhere where Sylphie is trying to make some sort of suggestion to Rudius. By the way, Rudius, and then just kind of going quiet. Now, yes, he's pointing out that she's glancing back at Ariel and the rest of them, but it is kind of making me wonder what she was actually going to say. Could it be that she's going to question their formation, question what they're doing, and she decides not to say it because she doesn't want to keep questioning him, decides to keep quiet? Or the idea that she's sort of trying to poke at Rudius. We've been walking for a long time, and they're probably really tired. They've been walking for quite a while. It was hard to say how long exactly. The lack of sun throws off your perception of time, making a single hour feel like 3. Also, moving through dark, unfamiliar terrain tends to get you more fatigued too. Rudius learned all this from his time adventuring, trekking through overgrown forests. Before Rudius could speak up for Ariel and her attendants, Triss came to a halt at a dead end. A stone tablet, similar to before, was sitting on the ground nearby. Activating the device, the wall of rock before them opened up and sunlight hit their faces. Just like that, they were outside again, before a dense forest. Based on the sun, they were walking for about 8 hours. That's a long time to be walking. I give Ariel a lot of credit here for walking for that long. Especially, again, since it's indicating that it was an uphill trek for most of the time. Triss took a few strides into the open before turning to them. Welcome to the Kingdom of Asura, everyone. She had a playful grin spread across her face. They had made it safely across the border after all. It is kind of cute because it kind of gives us an indication that Triss has gone through a lot of crap. She's kind of gotten very kind of crude and had probably a rough life, and then now she's kind of working for Ariel, has given that loyalty to Ariel. Yeah, this is probably one of those moments where she turns around and says, basically, Ariel, look what I did. I got you here. You're back in the kingdom. You didn't think you were able to get back to Kingdom. It's a massive benefit for them. Like her, now yes, one of the other bandits could have done it, but her herself doing something, achieving something that she knows that Ariel was trying to achieve, she's got to be very proud of herself. But yeah, finally back home. I did like that we had some moments here before they got to Asura, or at least Ars, to actually have Rudius sort of have these moments of recalling his old life, and yes, Sylphie and Edis as well. Probably the juiciest, smile-inducing moment of these chapters. This exit was a bit more southeast of the actual border checkpoint. South of here was the Donati region. Fatoa was off to the southeast. Their ultimate destination, the royal capital, was further south of Donati. Now this is interesting because when I got to this point, I even said it in the last Mushoku Monday, I was talking about how I thought Ars was going to be more to the west. Based on the map, it kind of made it, I kind of assumed that this big, massive, building was what Ars was, and it was literally on the coast, way over there. But he's kind of indicating this idea that they came through this spot, which is actually more east from the actual border, and then they have to go south to get to Donati, and even further south to get to where Ars is. So it's okay, that kind of makes it me think that it's more to the east in that valley where Fatoa region's to the north and the Asura kingdom's here. I guess maybe more towards the center. It does have a flag there, so maybe that is possibly what the actual marker is for the actual, the capital of the Austria Kingdom. So I guess it makes more sense, but that is kind of interesting to kind of note that, like, the border is, like, way further towards the west in that little mountain range. I like geographical stuff, which it kind of does bug me how vague the map is that they gave us a long time ago. But I do like piecing it all together. After a breather, they made their way out of the forest. Triss was anxious to get them moving due to the route being used for specific times for smuggling. Dawn till dusk was smuggling in, night was for smuggling out. If two groups bumped into each other, the head of the bandits gang tended to get very upset. That would explain why they were kept waiting in a cabin overnight as well. That's kind of one interesting thing, because that does indicate the idea that there are multiple bandit gangs and multiple leaders, and so Triss and her band isn't the only ones, and they all seemingly know about this one path, which is kind of a question mark. You'd think that you'd want more control. That way, something like that can be kept a secret, because yes, one of these bands could technically leak that information to Asura. And then this little spot right here, maybe they have control over there, but it doesn't indicate this area they have control over it because it's in Asura. So they could lose this path just by this spot being caught and taken control by Asura. Or they have enough people in high powers that know about it, but don't do anything because they give them money and favors. Out of the forest, they went south through the Donati region. They stayed off the main highways, sticking to less traveled back roads that locals used. While these roads weren't on the map, Triss knew them like the back of her hand. Thanks to her, they were staying one step ahead of Aber, assuming he was even pursuing them at this point. Yeah, he's still up there at the checkpoint going, they must have went back up north. Like, maybe they're not coming. There was a chance the man god and his allies knew where they were, and simply decided to concentrate their forces at the capital or the palace. There was no telling if it was the man god or Darius that was calling the shots about these things, but they needed to tread very carefully regardless. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like there's so much focus on the man god being the enemy and the man god pulling the strings, but when you think about it, yeah, technically, Darius is just as clever. He's just as nasty. And it's probably not his first rodeo here. He probably has a lot of things planned. And so keeping too much focus on the man god being the one causing everything, again, going to what he said earlier, just because I don't understand something doesn't mean I need to completely attribute it to the man god. That makes it to where I don't make correct judgments. Turning south, they passed by the Fatoa region. Oof. This is such an oof moment. This is sad because I think after all this time, there was a side of me that kind of wants them to return to the Fatoa region. And this might actually open the door to it. Let's be perfectly honest. With Ariel possibly taking the throne, if she succeeds, it is kind of nice, the idea that technically that would open the door to Rudius and family being able to come back here. Now, I like that they kind of address it with the conversation between Sylphie and Edis. I mean, it's not like there's anything there for them. That's the sad reality of the displacement incident. Everything that they had and loved and cherished, their memories of their past, is all gone. Everything that wasn't a person was sucked up and disintegrated. Everything's gone. And again, that was one of those frustrating things about the anime adaptation. The novel itself indicates that everything, trees, grass, everything is gone. If it wasn't a human that was holding on to something, and it even indicate the idea that there was possibly even that possibility being sent somewhere else, but if it wasn't a person and they were touching or holding something, it evaporated. So even his house, again, I do appreciate what they sort of did with the anime with that situation, because it's giving a frame, a border to everything to give you that imagination of him walking into the door and seeing his old house and, the memories of his family in there. But in the perspective of this novel, from the perspective of Rudius, Edis, Sylphie, there's nothing there. Their life there is gone. All that's left is a flat ground. It was just flat ground. And that's sort of how they portrayed it was so well was when Paul first arrived back to the refugee camp, or at least the Fatoa region. He's literally standing before mud, just dirt, because everything's gone. So yes, it makes sense that there's nothing tying them here. Edis lost her entire family, her estate, her home, her hometown, everything gone. Rudius lost his own village, lost everybody, lost family and everything like that. Yes, they still have family members. Edis doesn't, unfortunately. Just has the butler and Ghislaine. Sylphie, doesn't have anybody. Her mother and father are gone. Rudius, yes, has his mother and everybody, but they can move with him. They're with him now. So it's like there's nothing really to gain going back there, other than to say that we're in the region that we grew up in. There's no home there. There's no family. There's no village. Buena Village is gone. So it does make sense that there's not a necessity to go back. And I kind of like that they actually addressed it. So even with Ariel taking over this region, don't need to go back. Unless Sylphie wants to be near Ariel and help her. But I think, if I remember correctly, they already indicated the idea that once Ariel takes control of the throne, part ways. There's no need to stay there. She achieved what I wanted to help her with. Journeying south, they passed through the Fatoa region. Some years had passed since the rebuilding effort began in earnest. Fields of crops were dotted here and there across the landscape. The people living in the area looked as if they regained some of their spirit too. Still, it was a far cry from the endless fields of golden wheat Rudius remembered. It'd probably take another decade before Fatoa region regained that level of prosperity. But it is nice they're trying. And I think for people that have lived there in their entire lives and never established anywhere else to live, this is important. Because again, that was kind of what they indicated with Paul and the search and rescue squad when they were sending people back. These people did not want to be in Millis. They wanted to go home. That's where our home is. That's where the grave of our family members are at. We want to be there where we grew up, where our legacy was at. And yes, it sucks that they went back to find nothing but dirt, but that didn't matter to them. They wanted to rebuild it, so they fought to rebuild it. So massive credits to them. Edis and Sylphie paused, horses side by side, as they looked across the land. Sylphie looked nostalgic, but Edis frowned sulkily. There's a lot more fields of wheat than the last time we passed through here. If you say so, I don't remember. I hope they get it rebuilt soon. Tossing her head, Edis looked more surly than before. Couldn't care less. Come on, don't say that. It's the place where we were born and raised, right? I'm not saying that I'd like to go back here for good, but I'm sure you have some old friends living here, right? Not really. Everyone back at home hated my guts. I guess I wasn't too popular either, actually. Sylphie paused, smiling slightly as she recalled the past. It put Rudius in a kind of sentimental mood as well. Both Sylphie and Edis were loners as kids, but for different reasons. Sylphie bullied, retreating into her shell like a turtle. Edis jumped at anyone who approached her, scaring them off with her wild outbursts. If they had met back then maybe they could have bounced each other out. Nah, it didn't seem too likely. The only outcome that he could picture was Edis beating Sylphie until she cried. While she had herself under control these days, back then, she was basically a wild animal. Then again, sending Sylphie back as she was now, it might turn into more of co-bullies type of situation. She had gotten tougher over the years. I don't think I've ever heard the term co-bullies. I'm assuming what they're meaning here with the translation is that if he sent the current Sylphie back in time and she met the younger Edis, they would bully each other. I don't get that at all. I don't really get that comment at all. I'm kind of curious what the actual Japanese is saying here, but that aside, I don't know that when I read this, I'm like, yes, my mind immediately goes to, yeah, if the young Sylphie met the young Edis, she would beat the fire out of her. But I don't really know. Like, the way that they describe Edis younger was more of an idea that she went to places and anybody that approached her, she would attack. And I don't think that Sylphie herself would approach Edis. But there's like a what if scenario that kind of plays in my head of like, I almost want to imagine that there's a chance that Edis would see Sylphie, see how timid she is, and it would tick her off. Like, Edis would hate how Sylphie would be so timid. She would just be like, you're so weak. Grow up. What are you doing? You're weak. And just lash out at her. But then there's like a side of me that would almost think that because of Sylphie being so passive and so timid, I kind of wonder if there's a possibility that Edis would reluctantly for a while sort of try to drill into Sylphie's head to stand up for herself. Like, I can see something positive possibly coming from that. And it would really require them to being forced to being in a scenario where they can't leave each other. Because I can see Sylphie not wanting that and just get the hell out of there. Like, but again, Sylphie dealt with bullying for a long time. She didn't accept it. It was her every day. This is life. They're going to constantly bullying me. She was going about her days constantly being bullied in that village. Because I think she was like 4 or 5 when Rudius met her. 5, I think, when Rudius met her. So she had been dealing with it probably for at least 3 years. This was her life. I gotta go bring dad some food. Oh, there's the bullies again. They're gonna treat me like crap again. I'll get through it, deal with it, move on. She became kind of dead to it. This is life. And I could see her totally doing the same thing with Edis, being mean to her. But again, if they're kind of trapped in an environment, there's a side of me that would see either one, Sylphie becoming like possibly strengthened by it. Like going through something like that is almost like going through hard mode. Or I wonder if there's a possibility that because she's so passive and she was accepting it so much, that eventually Edis would I don't know, bolster her a little bit, bump her up, get her to stand on her own 2 feet. Sort of like becoming a little sister figure to Edis, and then Edis trying to mold her into something better. I don't know. It's just a random scenario that popped in my head, but yeah, it would probably not go well. But I don't see like the current Sylphie being sent back. It would suddenly she would fight Edis. Like, I don't think that's Sylphie. At least that's not what I'm getting impression. Unless it's going on the idea of like her skills and her bravery now being sent back to her younger self. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's weird. But co-bullies. Co-bullies. I learned a new phrase. Co-bullies. Look, Sylphie, I'm just going to say one thing. What is it? I couldn't have done anything useful for Fotoa, even if I stay here. Oh, right. You were a daughter of the Lord, weren't you? Sort of a princess of yourself. It's kind of slipped my mind. I was just a stupid dress-up doll. Well, you're pretty imposing these days. I bet you make a very convincing ruler if you wanted to. You think? Her compliment put Edis in a better mood. The girl wasn't difficult to placate. Well, whatever. It's not like I want to rule Fotoa either way. There's no way I could have handled a job that complicated. It does feel like you were born to be a swordsmaster, I guess. Exactly. Still, you could have easily ended up spending your whole life as an Osra noble, huh? Not a chance. I bet Rudy would have stuck around to help you, and ended up ruling from the shadows. He probably would have made you the head of the Boreas family in no time at all. Rudius was hoping she wasn't being serious. Yeah, the way things were playing out, I don't think... that's a good question mark, because again, before Rudius got there, the plan was to have Edis essentially become an adventurer. She keeps attacking people, send her off, let her become an adventurer, and hunt dungeons, because she's never going to be able to sit down and marry a noble or just do anything. And yes, it was Rudius arriving there that sort of put her in check, like chill, like chill her out, and presented an option. That's what Philip brought that up to Rudius. Hey, I could take over the family for you. You want to do it? Let's do it. And yes, that's her mother as well. Get in bed with him. He's your last chance. They all seen that Rudius was guiding her and making her chill out. And yes, that he was the only person that was essentially accepting it. They were all gearing up. I think they were all gearing up for the idea that we need to get Rudius to stay here, get with her, and get her to take over the family. And yes, undo this trauma that Hilda has been going through for so long. And yes, probably was affecting Philip too. They were losing their children. They wanted to take it over. This had to stop. And again, I think that Rudius was that chance. Yeah, technically that would lead up to, possibly, if he were supporting her from the background, getting Edis to essentially take over the family. The entire family, all branches, become the lead of that family. And yes, be a leader of this area. But no matter what choice, and yeah, I think Rudius kind of alludes to it in a minute. No matter what the options are here, it wouldn't have really happened. The displacement incident happened. Now, what Sylphie could be talking about here is technically when Edis came back, when they made it back to the Fotoa region and the refugee camp, it was then presented to her to get back in the game, get back in there. But none of this makes any sense. This scenario, and it's just really Sylphie just talking about their lives and where they've gone and the possibilities. It's really just a nice little moment here of the possibilities, the what ifs. But yes, I don't see if Edis at that point, when they got back to the refugee camp, because the displacement incident, no matter what's going to happen, it's not really so much choice. It happened. It's what happens after that is the what ifs. I don't think that if at that point, when they came back, that Edis goes, okay, I'll do it. What do we do? Yes, there's a possibility that Edis could have, with the aid of Rudius, work with them in order to bolster herself up, rebuild this area, and then eventually meet, Ariel and possibly help them. She gets into it in a minute, getting with Ariel and stuff like that and building up. But I don't think with Darius present, that would have happened. I think the moment that Darius found out that Edis was there, something would have happened. She would have been kidnapped, attacked, whatever. I don't see them leaving Edis to build up and rise up in the wake of all the politics going on, especially since she be the lord or the lady of a destroyed land. Again, she wouldn't become the lord or lady. The ownership of that area, the lead of that area, got transferred. When Saros was executed, they took it over. It's not like Edis coming in here, suddenly she's the lady of the land. No, they would have squashed her out. And I don't think if they played into what Alphonse, was it Alphonse? Yeah, Alphonse. I don't think if they played into what Alphonse wanted to do with Edis, Rudius would be working in the backgrounds. He'd be left behind. It would be Darius would take her, and it'd be it from that point. But again, I do like the what ifs. I like the idea of thinking about what ifs if there's something in it that's kind of interesting, especially what ifs from characters' perspectives. I think it's much more interesting than even my theories. I'm so boring. Sylphie continued. Then he would have seduced me and wiggled his way into Princess Ariel's inner circles. The Boreas family would back her for the throne, and we'd end up fighting Darius and grapple together. Again, right here, she's sort of putting this as the time frame that the displacement incident happened, and that Edis, again, returned home and fought to become the head of the family. It wouldn't have worked out. Again, they killed Saros and took over that land. Edis had no power. Edis had zero power. Now, the idea that Alphonse had was that if she gets with Palamon and then goes to Darius, and that she can manipulate Darius to possibly getting power for them, thus rebuilding the family and rebuilding the land. Alphonse, all he cared about was saving that region, saving the Fatoa area. Not so much the well-being of Edis. That's why Ghislaine hated his idea. You're literally selling her off to get power and to restore your land. And why there was so much pushback in that scenario was this land had no care for her. They had no expectations for her. They wanted her to go off to be an adventurer. Now they need her? Now they want her to help this region? Screw that. I'm out of here. Rudius thought, Sylphie let me seduce her in this scenario? How would that work out? They probably wouldn't even run into each other. Okay, it wasn't best to overthink a game of make-believe. Okay, thanks for calling me out, Refugin. I like overthinking this. I like thinking about this, the what ifs, like I said. But yeah, that technically does make sense. Like, how is he going to run into Sylphie? And yes, if Rudius, if it took so damn long for Rudius to get the hint that Fitz is Sylphie, and they were literally in the same school, and Sylphie was constantly trying to get with him, if he couldn't figure it out there ain't no hell he's going to some random run into Ariel and see Fitz, and then suddenly he seduces her. Would never have happened. I think the fact that they were at the university was the only thing that got them so much time together that he was able to get that figured out. Because yes, Ariel's going to be in the palace. It's not like Edis is going to be in the palace. They might visit there now and then, but they're never going to be there long enough. Again, don't overthink a game of make-believe, Andrew. Sounds like things would turn out exactly the same. But you'd be the ruler of Fatoa region, and Rudy would be your loyal aide. I bet you two would be the talk of the whole kingdom. All I want to do is fight with my sword and make babies with Rudius. I don't want anything else. She's a simple girl. Simple needs. I want to cut people and make babies. She delivered that without a hint of shame. It was enough to make Rudius blush, even though he wasn't the one that said it. Aren't you satisfied with things the way they are, Sylphie? Oh, absolutely. Sometimes the whole thing feels like it's too good to be true, to be honest. You know, back when we first got married, Rudius and I used to go at it like animals every single night. When there wasn't anyone else around the house, he'd carry me off in the bedroom with this ravenous look on his face. And of course, I was quivering with anticipation the whole way. Sorry, I shouldn't be talking about this in public. Rudius certainly appreciated if she stopped that. Edis' eyes were narrowing with what seemed to be jealousy. He assumed she dragged him off in the bushes at night. It sucks. It's like, some good stuff, and now we're just going right back and talk about Rudius. Anyways, I think that's the whole reason why it's so fun to think about how things might have turned out, because I'm really happy with how they did. I wonder if I'll feel the same way when I have a child, too. If you and Rudy have a child, it'd probably be a real lecture. What's that supposed to mean? She had a point. Anyone with half the genes that he had would at least be moderately perverted. It made him anxious about how Lucy might turn out. I think there's that part. That's more of a mental thing. I don't think that's really in the genes. Rudius is just a pervert because he spent his entire previous life looking at prawn and stuff like that. But I do think that there's like an aspect of the genes of the Grey Rat family, because we're literally they're cousins. So it's like literally putting in a whole bunch of those the libido and the thirst that the Grey Rat family has all into one person. Sylphie wasn't much of a pervert, but she had Ellen Lace for a grandmother. What if those dormant, horny genes get activated by a combination of his own? they might end up with a daughter who went around sucking men dry. He'd have to enact some sort of secret morality lessons. It's like, okay, Lucy, sit down. It's time to talk. We have to have the talk, but it's not your normal talk. Yeah, I don't know why he brings this up because, again, that's not genes. Ellen Elise is, yes, Ellen Elise has talked about how, yes, the curse makes me do this, but I want to do it anyways. But physically, like outside of like the mental aspect of it, the only indication we have is that it's the curse that has caused her to have to do this. And I think through doing that, she's become essentially a sex fiend in a sense. That shouldn't pass down. Now, I had a theory way back when we first started bringing Elise into the picture as being related to Sylphie, that there was a possibility that Sylphie would be just as super thirsty as Elise, but we've never had any indication of that. And again, I think that was kind of squashed when we figured out that, yes, the reason that Elise is the way she is because this curse, and she's a cursed child, not really cursed. She has a disturbance in her mana that was caused by, yes, being put inside of this labyrinth for a long time and messing up her mind. And again, causing this curse that she has to get essentially fixed and somehow. And yes, that indicates that it's not something that is passed down through generations. And I sort of got into that a little bit more when we were talking about the book that Rudy's found in the library labyrinth. And this idea that it's not so much something that passes down through generations. If that was the case, then you would hear more about the idea of them essentially taking anybody that is a cursed child and making sure they have tons of babies. Like the whole thing with Zenova. Get that guy, like tie him down and make him make babies. Tie him down, stick a figurine in front of his face, and then put something on top of him. That's so wrong. That's so wrong. But that's what they would do. They would totally do that. I could see that. We need to have a bunch of children that all have his insane strength. I hope I get one soon. Oh, it won't take long. You're a full-blooded human, remember? You're a much better match for Rudy than I am. Either way, that comes later. Right now, the most important thing is to keep him safe. Yeah, you're right. They kept chatting, speculating on what Roxy was doing at the moment. Sylphie promising to teach Edis how to cook when they got home. Sylphie did most of the talking as Edis wasn't the best at casual conversation. Still, the sound of their voices made for a pleasant background noise on the road. After about 10 days on the road, they stopped at Riquet, a city near the edge of the Donati region and a hub for trade for the royal region. Most of the merchants here were heading south to bring goods to the royal region. This meant the streets were thick with representatives and headmen from villages across Donati, seeking to send their harvest south and buy the crops their people needed from the market. It was clearly a place of major economic importance for Asura as a whole. It was also larger than the whole of the magic city of Shiraya, even though it was just one giant trading post and rest stop. That's crazy. That's kind of I like those kind of contrasting things where you're like, the whole of the magic city of Shiraya, this trading post is bigger than it. It gives that realization of how big and massive Asura is. They wanted to make it to the capital city of Ars without making their presence be known. They gathered information in villages along the way, but found no clues about the pursuers. While a city this big offered plenty of places to ambush, it also offered Rudius' party concealment. Unfortunately, they stood out from the crowd. Ariel was still maintaining her anonymity, but that didn't matter as long as she was strutting around with a bodyguard like Ghislaine, Edis, and Sylphie. Luke was also a well-known figure in Asura in his own right. Yeah, you're sticking out like a sore thumb. Like they're going through there in a carriage, and then you have like, yeah, all these really powerful guards walking around it. And yeah, there's a chance that depending on how Sylphie is dressed right now, I'm kind of curious if they are actually dressed up as their personas. Is Sylphie walking around as Fitz? Because people can easily discover her. Or are they actually wearing different clothes? That's the question mark. You would think that, like Luke especially, you would probably like put a hood over his head, I guess. Sadly, while Triss knew all the roads in Asura, there wasn't any way around this one. Riquet was a choke point, like the border fortress, an excellent place for their enemies. Surprisingly, the guards at the gate didn't stop them, and there weren't ranks of armored soldiers across the streets inside. Triss guided them to an inn, well suited for keeping a low profile, and the staff there were connected to her bandit gang. They also owned buildings on every side of it, and tunnels that allowed for emergency escape. While they guarded Ariel inside, Triss would be gathering information in the streets. Rudius and Ghislaine kept a watch outside Ariel's room, while Edis, Sylphie, and Luke were with Ariel. Rudius was a bit anxious about Luke, but trusted that he wouldn't suddenly lose his mind and try to stab Ariel. That's a really bad statement to make following us essentially pointing out that, yeah, technically, the man god can do the same thing to Luke as he did to Rudius. You know, push him off in the deep end, basically. Make him go crazy. Make him do something rash, basically. Looking at Ghislaine, her ears perked up. The two of them hadn't talked much since this journey began. She must be more professional about her duties as a bodyguard than he'd ever be. Whenever he'd strike up a conversation with her, she'd cut him off, saying that she was listening for danger. Part of him started wondering if she hated his guts. After that extra chapter of the previous volume, nope. She gonna take care of you. But that's the whole point. Because she wants to take care of you, she's making sure that she listens to everything. And again, kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier with Edis, she probably hates the fact that he was put in any danger. However, she wasn't talking much to Edis either. She was probably just taking her job seriously. Today seemed to be an exception, as she started a conversation for once. Rudius. Yeah, Ghislaine? Thank you for your help earlier. With Wheataw's armor, I mean. Don't mention it. It's my whole job to support the rest of you. You've always been quick to think up clever tricks like this, haven't you? Ever since the old days. Was she talking about 10 years ago? He felt like he had changed a lot since then. But maybe to her, he was the same old cheeky brat. I guess so. They usually don't accomplish much against tougher enemies, though. For the tougher ones, you could have Lady Edis do the heavy lifting. It was surprising to hear her say that. She always seemed like the type to say that he had to find a way to handle it himself. That's the whole reason that she trained for all those many years. Yeah, you're right. In his heart, he wanted Sylphie and Roxy to stay put at home where it's safe. But for some reason, he didn't feel the same about Edis. It probably had to do with how much effort she put into fighting alongside him. The years she had spent at the Sword Sanctum had really paid off. Then again, it was impossible to imagine her waiting home while he wandered off. Yeah. This is an interesting thing, because this is kind of him solidifying in his mind what we're kind of been thinking ever since Edis came back. This idea that she's going to be the husband of the house, the protector, and thus that's what she trained for. And I guess the best way to put it is to rob her of the thing that she fought for so long to do wouldn't be right. Again, she went over here and trained for many, many, many years, all for the sake of standing at his side and fighting for him and protecting him. To say, stay there, don't follow me, I want you to be safe, is literally saying, by the way, I don't care that you did all that. You're still staying put. Robbing her of everything that she had earned. She earned this. She earned the right to be at his side. And I think there is probably also an aspect of comfort. Knowing that she is capable, she's going to pull it off. Now, yes, it still comes down to the end of the day, when things start hitting the fan, he's probably not going to like the idea that she's at his side, because she's going to be in danger. Like when he does face something like an Orsted again, if like tomorrow suddenly Orsted sends him a letter that says, forget it, I want you dead, come out here, I'm going to kill you. I don't think he would bring Edis with him. I mean, there's a chance he would, but I don't think he would. Because I don't think that he'd be able to. I think he knows that even with Edis at his side, he probably wouldn't be able to. Now, he could probably formulate a plan and think that it would work, but I think there's deep down inside he wouldn't think that it would be possible. And he wouldn't want her to go with it. He's like, I'll just go there and die myself. I don't want Edis to die. But anyways. But yeah, there's no way in hell that he's going to go off on an adventure and she's not going to be like, I'm coming too. Or she would follow him, just like in the future Rudius situation, just follow him everywhere. Rudius suddenly realized the conversation was dying. By the way, Ghislaine, are you still keeping up with your reading and writing? Yeah, I practice like you taught me when I have some spare time. Wouldn't want to lose skill that it took time to learn. That was admirable. Edis, on the other hand, had forgotten almost everything he had taught her. Yeah, technically she was so focused on this that completely disappeared. Whereas Ghislaine was already kind of established, and then she was adding that to her repertoire, basically. You know, the others at the Sword Sanctum didn't believe me when I told them that I learned how to write. Couldn't you have just wrote something to prove it to them? I did, but most of them can't read either. That's like such a punchline. So I told them I learned how to do this, and they laughed at me. Did you show them? Yeah, but they can't read it. They said I was scribbling a bunch of nonsense and laughed in my face. That's stupid. That's stupid. What about you, Rudius? You still practicing with the sword? I bet, yeah. When I have some downtime at home, I practice the forms that you taught me, and do a bunch of swings as part of my daily workout. Really? You're a full-fledged magician now. So I figured you would have stopped years ago. Even magicians need to stay in shape, you know. Yeah, honestly, there are some cases where I think he's experienced other people, but in most cases, yes, it's kind of indicated that mages, they don't care about their bodies, and they kind of neglect that, which is probably to their negative in the idea that at some point some crap's going to hit the fan, their tank goes down, their warriors go down, and they can't escape danger. Reese wasn't trying to improve his skills with the sword at the moment. Becoming Paul's equal was once his goal, but he was gone now. He only really used it to teach Norn. In this world, you couldn't make it too far as a swordsman without the use of a battle aura. Oh, this reminds me. Do you remember the Promise You Baby? Back when we were just a kid? What promise was this? Slipped your mind, I see. You said you were going to make another figurine of me. I don't like this. I've heard you're still doing the figurines even now, right? Make me another one sometime, if you don't have anything better to do. Absolutely. Thanks. I don't know much about art, but I do like your work a lot. That was nice to hear. But why do people of this world have to constantly say things like that? With battle looming on the horizon, it made him antsy, and he hoped that they weren't setting death flags here. While this feeling was due to cheesy movies from his previous life, people talked about their futures before battles and ended up dead. In reality, it was the other way around. Reminding yourself of the reasons you want to survive made it more likely that you would. That is true. It's true. The storytelling, cheesy storytelling that we get with, our world is, yes, in a lot of cases it is. They say the death flag. They talk about how, they got a wife at home, kids on the way, can't wait to get back home to my new beautiful daughter, and they end up dead. And then for the main characters, it's always yes, they'll talk about that stuff, but when they're in battle itself, remembering those things is what pushes them to go further. Because I have a wife at home, I need to make it home, and that gives them the strength to overcome something. So it's like, if you're a side character, it means death. If you're a main character, that means you have essentially inspiration. And inspiration pushes you through it. But yeah, I do agree with the idea that applying that mentality to reality of this world that Rudius is in is, yes, both are the case. It could be the aspect that you're flagging and it's just to set up that emotion before they kill him off. Or it could be, yes, like right here, Ghislaine is establishing something that she's looking forward to. But I don't like it. I don't like it. They're flagging Ghislaine so bad. They did it with the extra chapter of volume 16, and now they're doing it with this chapter. I like that figurine you made. Make one for me, all right? I really like. I don't know much about art, but that's what sucks is the build-up for this seems like it's too obvious. We're finally getting into Ghislaine's character here, and it's building up more and more as the chapters go in. And even right here, I find it very interesting that Ghislaine remembered this. Again, this is a character that is sort of portrayed as being somebody that doesn't really think things through. It's not very smart. Is only now recently with meeting Rudius is learning how to read and write. She's doing all these things that she never learned before, and she feels proud of it. And that's like the whole sad thing with her saying that she told the people at Sword Sanctum she learned how to read and write, and they laughed at her. That feral girl could never learn that stuff. When Rudius was in the Beast Folk tribes, he literally told them that she'd learned all this stuff, and they didn't believe her. She's a wild feral beast. No way that she learned that stuff. It's like all these things that Ghislaine has done to improve herself outside of just her sword, and then here she's remembering something a long time ago, and she wants to see it again. I don't know much about art, but I like what you did. You said you were gonna make it. Did you make it? Oh, you forgot. I didn't. I want that. Can you make one for me? It's super sweet. But again, I don't like the flagging. Don't like the flagging. Don't kill off Ghislaine. Damn it, Refugin. Don't kill off Ghislaine. Ghislaine's ears and nose twitched. Rudius prepared his staff for a fight, but Ghislaine held out her hand to stop him. Don't worry, it's fine. Triss walked into the inn with sacks in both of her hands. Hey there, brought some food for you. Appreciate it. Yeah, aren't I nice? Make sure you savor it real gratefully. She handed a bag to them with pear-like fruits inside before walking up the stairs. Triss had only been with them for 10 days, but it felt like she had already found her place in the party. Basically, she fell right into the same category as Elmoy and Cleone, a true believer in the righteous Princess Ariel. She had a foul mouth, but she seemed like a decent person. Only real complaint that Rudius had was that her clothes made it seem like very difficult to keep his eyes where they belonged. Well, Ghislaine's outfit was no different, but it was easier to appreciate the muscular beauty of a warrior's body on a purely artistic level. Sure. Sure. Triss seems to be in high spirits today. You're right. I wonder if something happened. Taking a bite of one of the fruits, it was crunchy and more sour than sweet. For some reason, a lot of the fruits in this world didn't taste so great on their own. Gotta dip them in sugar. you gotta give them the Roxy treatment. I expect she has some useful information. Learning something valuable always puts those sorts in a good mood. Geese was the same way. I bet you're right. Ariel tasked Triss with scouting and gathering all sorts of information. Learning the whereabouts of Auber and Darius' soldiers was on top priority, but she wanted to know other things as well. She would present everything to Ariel, who would then choose what information to share with Rudius. There was a chance that he'd miss out on hearing some crucial information, but at this point, he decided to accept that risk. It wasn't like he was capable of controlling events perfectly in any case. His job was to consider the tidbits Ariel passed on to him as careful as he could. Again, that goes in that whole aspect of like, condense what you're focusing on, that way you're not so scattered everywhere. That reminds me, did Geese say something about heading to Asra? I guess we might end up bumping into him somewhere. He'll probably spot us first, if he's still around. That sounded like Geese, picking them out from a distance and staging a dramatic reunion. But knowing him, he probably lost all of his money gambling and wandered off to another country years ago. Isn't Geese a pretty good gambler, though? Only when he's broke. Okay, the only statement here that doesn't really make sense to me is that Rius says, that reminds me, didn't Geese say something about heading for Asra? Unless he's just kind of making a passing comment. Yeah, Ghislaine wouldn't know that. Unless Ellen Lace told her what Geese said back there or something. He's just probably just saying it like, oh yeah, he said this. And then she's like responding to it. Roxy told Rudius that the kingdom of Asra wasn't a great place to live as an adventurer like Geese. There weren't many monsters to slay in general, and the government had knights protecting specific villages. Apparently not Sarah's. Gotta dig up that old wound. Also, the royal magicians and their knightly counterparts were periodically dispatched for large-scale hunts that doubled as training missions. As a result, monster hunting jobs were few and far between. Large Osram businesses tended to have their own dedicated resource-gathering operations, so there weren't any requests for raw materials either. With how safe and secure the kingdom was, the demand for temporary guards were limited as well. Tasks posted were mostly tedious, time-consuming things like missing persons and deliveries. You can find work helping out at someone's farm, but there simply wasn't enough real adventuring to be done compared to other countries. That was more true or closer to the capital city of Ars. Anyone who became adventurers drifted off to Fatoa or Donati, and eventually further north or south. Yeah, and that was kind of what they were talking about with Broken Arrow? Counter Arrow. Counter Arrow. Broken Arrow. Those with remarkable skills or training could sometimes find steady posts as tutors or bodyguards, but that was a high bar to clear. Plus, you didn't need to be an adventurer to secure those jobs. It all made sense why the headquarters of the adventure guilds was located in the Mills continent instead. Ghislaine's ears twitched again. This time, her expression turned slightly stern. Rudius prepared his staff again, but Ghislaine wasn't looking at the entrance, but at the second floor. Listening carefully, Rudius could hear arguing. I'm gonna go take a look, Ghislaine. Right. Making his way up, Sylphie and Edis were outside of Ariel's room, watching the door with concern. Hey, Sylphie. Oh, Rudy. Trish just made it back a few minutes ago, but now it sounds like Princess Ariel and Luke are arguing about something. That sounded ominous. Did Ariel not have the situation under control? Maybe this was part of the plan. Sometimes arguments could be necessary. Yeah, I guess this idea of kind of like stirring something out of him by causing an argument. I don't know. It's Rudius, pardon me, but I'm coming in. He knocked out of politeness, but swung the door open without waiting for a response. Luke was at his feet, looking pale and shaken. Ariel was sitting in the chair with an unruffled expression. Triss, on the other hand, was looking on awkwardly. She's like, what the hell? Ah, Sir Rudius, just the man I wanted to see. Has something happened, Your Highness? Yes, Triss has just brought us some intriguing information. About what, if I may ask? It concerns Lord Saros Boreas Greyrat. As it happens, it's often easier to learn about the intrigues of the Osran royal court in these regional cities than it would be in the capital. Those who know too much tend to put distance between themselves and Ars, where certain anxious nobles might have them killed. In any case, we've learned the primary culprit behind Lord Saros' fall. And who would that be? Luke's face contorted into an alarming grimace. Ariel, on the other hand, looked as emotionless as a mask. I'm afraid it's a member of my faction, acting on their own initiative. Someone who also happened to have a personal grudge against Lord Saros, namely, Palmon Notos Greyrat. That's weird. That's really weird. I mean, yes, technically they kind of laid out that, yes, obviously there's a hatred here that they had with each other. There's issues that were a grudge that was between them. So yes, it technically makes sense that he does have a motive for it. But I seem to remember there was a lot of connection with Gravel specifically. And yeah, that's obviously, again, since Palmon was forced to kind of have to change allegiances because of being of Ariel Levin, it could be one of those things where he changes allegiances and then immediately it's like, oh, yeah, this kind of works in my favor. Great. So it was Palmon himself who had done it. That sounded plausible, unfortunately. The Notos clan had been the leading backers of Ariel amongst the aristocracy, while the Boreas family favored Gravel. They were enemies at the time. On top of that, it sounded like Palmon hated Saros for personal reasons. He probably jumped eagerly on his chance to bring down the old man. This wasn't good news, but it didn't come as a surprise either. Despite the circumstances at the time, Saros was still the liege lord of an entire region of Asra, and even with his territory devastated, he had allies amongst the First Prince faction. Only another powerful, influential noble could really have orchestrated his downfall. What do you intend to do, Princess Ariel? I'll allow Ghislaine to take his life, just as I promised her. Luke bit his lip hard at those words. This certainly explained his outburst. Rudius was honestly surprised Ariel was being so blunt about this, knowing how much Luke cared about his family. It seemed almost like she was publicly choosing Ghislaine over him. However, that's only going to happen if Palmon and the Notos family truly have betrayed us. We don't have any conclusive proof of that just yet. Assuming it is true, I intend to have Ghislaine execute him, and then appoint Luke as the new head of the Notos family. And if he really hasn't betrayed you, I'll convince Ghislaine to settle with the others. The others? Oh, Palmon was a primary culprit. That implied there was other conspirators too. So she would spare her ally, but murder the others. It didn't sound much like justice, but that was the way things went sometimes. At the moment, Rudius couldn't scrounge up any sympathy for a bunch of murderous aristocrats he had never met. True. Is that understood, Luke? There's no proof any of this is true. Luke's expression was pained. It seemed that he understood Ariel's perspective, but he didn't want to accept it on an emotional level. Still, he was staying relatively calm, given the discussion of potential execution of his father. Yeah, that's one of those troubling things. Is like, he's loyal to Ariel. This has been presented. She's having to make a judgment against his father. So emotionally, he's like, I don't want this to happen. So the only thing that he can really lean on is we don't have proof. We don't make a judgment. We don't have proof, and it's one of those things where you could probably provide him proof, and he's constantly going to go, that doesn't prove anything. That doesn't prove anything. I understand, and I want to respect her choices, but I'm going to try to make excuses to try to prevent it from happening. It is entirely possible that someone's manipulating us. Luke, rest assured, as I've explained previously, Rudius will not be usurping control of the Notos Grey Rat family. Your Highness, we shouldn't discuss this in front of him. I think it's the other way around, actually. I'd like to make this very clear to him and everyone else involved. No matter how much he contributes to our cause, I have no intention of granting Rudius a rank in the Austrian nobility. Rudius was fine with this. He wouldn't have accepted even if she offered. Yeah, technically it goes to what he's saying. He doesn't want to get involved with you guys. But again, this goes back to the statement that was made in the previous one, the previous chapters, was like, but to Luke, he doesn't believe that. No, he's got to be wanting this. I want it, so he's got to want it. He's lying. But for whatever reason, Luke was still looking at him with hostility. He wasn't sure how to react to that. It felt like the next words that he spoke, or the slight change in his facial expression, would determine Luke's course of action. That's like one of those moments where you're like, no matter what I do right now, it's gonna set him off. Would Luke turn on him after all? While hesitating, Ariel stepped in. Now then, Luke, I think we should continue this discussion by ourselves. You don't mind, do you, Rudius? Of course not. She said that she'd handle this at the moment. Staying out of it seemed best. Rudius watched quietly as she and Luke walked out together. It's like, why do they leave? Like, I assume that Rudius would leave the room and they would continue talking. Maybe she's realizing he's too dang loud. We got to go somewhere else. And here it is. And here it is. There you go. Ariel later reported back to Rudius that she finally convinced him to open up and be honest with her. Long story short, their suspicions were correct. The man god was giving him advice. Apparently, it had only happened once so far. As they were preparing for the journey, the man god warned Luke, be ready for Rudius's betrayal. His claim was that Rudius secretly allied himself with Darius so that he could seize control of the Notos Grey Rat house. This is what I meant by like this like anticlimactic moment. Like, I'm reading through this and I get to this part and I'm like, all right. Because it literally just like lays it out like she came back and said that this is happening. Like, it's a summary. Like, we don't even get the conversation. We don't get to see from Ariel's perspective. I would have loved an Ariel perspective right here. We then left the room, leaving Rudius behind. I had things that I wanted to talk about with Luke, and then go into the whole process of her trying to gain his trust, and then eventually that breaking point. How did we come to this? How the hell did this come up? I get the idea of Luke going, yes, somebody told me that Rudius is after your family, or after the family. But, like, coming to the conclusion where you're like, a guy told me in this bright area, that seems a little odd to come up in conversation. But yeah, still, it was a little bit disappointing. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier, is I do like that Ariel's the one that gets it out of him. Like, again, this idea that Rudius is the one, Rudius isn't the ultimate problem solver. These chapters are literally Ariel's doing it. We're seeing Ariel in action finally, before we go into this big battle. But yeah, I still don't think, I still want to say there's probably going to be a thing where we find out later that that wasn't it. I think she managed to get him to say things, but I think he kept to strictly talking about what's upsetting him about Rudius. So he has admitted why he's angry. That the man god told him this, but I think he's omitting the other visits. It says that the man god only visited him once, but I think there's multiple times he's just not revealing it. I still have my theories that the Luke, the give Rudius the Luke juice, that will help his confidence. Then the go duel Rudius, that will bolster his confidence. Then there's the take a rat into the floating fortress and make sure it gets into Rudius's bag. I think there's so many more visits here because, and yes, that's technically me just gravitating towards every like key pinnacle point that we've brought up Luke at all. Like with the rat thing, it was literally future Rudius possibly being very paranoid that did that. But that technically, I think that was after he came back, I think. So it would be later on his paranoia. Because I don't remember if it mentioned that Luke did it in the diary. I think he spoke that. I don't remember. If he spoke it to Rudius in person, it would be probably paranoia. If it was in the journal at that moment, it would be too early for the paranoia. But still, the question mark is how the rat got up there. And then this is so funny when this happened right here, I immediately go, well, crap. If it's only one visit, if he's telling the truth, then I go back to, okay, then who did the rat? Who did the rat thing? And I'm like thinking, okay, who all went up there? I think back then it was like Nanahoshi, Ariel, Sylphie, Luke, Rudius, and that was it? Question mark. So it's like who brought the rat up there? If the rat was brought up there, it could have been that the rat was up there and it was placed in his bag. But it's like, well, then who else would it be? Would it be Sylphie? Would it be Ariel? Question mark. But again, that would take another person out of the picture. But now that would have been pre that turning point. So after turning point 4, it would have been shifted into somebody else. So whoever was being controlled by the man god up into that point would be different than now. It's a question mark. And then again, yes, right here, it could be the man god telling Ariel to tell Rudius that just tell Rudius that Luke is working for me, but I only visit him once. That way he's limited on what he's talking about there. Let's limit the scope there. That'll take the suspicion off of you and focus it in on Luke. In this scenario, Rudius was motivated by thirst for power, lust for Ariel, and simple greed. Sylphie had no idea about Rudius' intentions. It was all happening behind her back. During the day, Rudius would pretend to be Ariel's ally, but carefully lead her into the enemy's trap. At night, he'd meet up with Darius' spies and tell them everything he knew. In fact, Rudius had secretly orchestrated all these events. After many years of scheming, even his marriage to Sylphie was supposedly just another step in his master plan. Rudius thought this version of me sounded like a ridiculously thorough and clever guy. It was a shame that he couldn't give him the reins. His life would probably go a lot smoother. He's like, I like this Rudius. Can I make that a reality? But no, it is funny because, like, yes, technically in the man god telling him that, every night he'll go out and talk to Darius' spies. That was Rudius meeting with Orsted. So it was, this kind of implies this idea that man god's seen a lot of this stuff. He's thinking to himself, yeah, technically Rudius is going to be meeting up with Orsted now. So I'm going to plant this into his mind that it's not Orsted he's meeting with, Darius' spies. Clever. At first, Luke found all this implausible. It was particularly hard for him to believe that Rudius had any interest in joining nobility. Rudius felt like Luke never trusted him that much, but maybe he had earned a benefit of the doubt. That said, with recent events like the destruction of the teleportation circles and the betrayal of the Noda's family unfolding as the man god predicted, that was enough to chip away at Luke's faith in him. Once he started looking at Rudius with suspicion, he found reason to believe the man god's story. It also seemed he still suspected Rudius even now. Ariel told Rudius the best way to prove his innocence to Luke was through his actions. She also promised that she'd keep him from doing anything that was unwise in the meantime. This was a relief to Rudius. The man god hadn't done anything that clever here, so it wouldn't be that hard to break his grip on Luke. The fact of the matter was, Rudius never met this Darius. He had no desire to take over his dad's childhood home, and he wasn't interested in sleeping with Ariel. I don't know about that last part, dude. I don't know about that last, dude. You had me at the halftime, man. You almost had me there. Luke could suspect him to his heart's content, but Rudius wasn't going to betray them. By the man god's standards, this seemed like half-assed work. It felt pretty clear that he never expected to get much out of Luke. Still, Rudius never would have learned any of this from Luke himself. It was a good thing that Ariel stepped up to handle it. She was way better suited for the job. Yeah, I think even Rudius right here is kind of drilling it into my head that I think there's going to be something else. I don't think that's the only visit. Now, there's two scenarios here that I have in my mind. Is one that the man god said to him, if they're getting on to you, do not tell them about the other visits. Or it could simply be that the man god has manipulated him to not remember the other visits. So that way Luke doesn't divulge. Like, the man god knows that Luke is going to divulge his stuff. And so he did something to Luke to make him forget the other visits. And maybe can allow them to come to light later on. I do think that Reese is almost kind of flagging here and expressing how this seems like it seems like it just, it's half-assed. He put no thought into this. It seemed too easy. Yeah, we'll see. But again, there's no telling that he won't have another visit with Luke. And the next visit, I think he's going to manipulate him more. Ariel. Rudius has brought Ariel under his wing, and he's using Orsted, the dragon god, to manipulate her. You need to kill Rudius to free her from the shackles of the dragon god, the man who's seeking to destroy this world. That's what's going to happen. They're going to get separated somehow, and then the man god's going to pull him in. Because Rudius is already pointing out that despite talking to Ariel, he's still looking at him with distrust. Luke hates him. He's revealed this to Ariel, but he still doesn't trust Rudius as much as he's trusting this man god. Because the man god, again, has foretold everything that he's run into. He's got to be right. This dude's telling the whole future. He knows something. Not Rudius. He's going to believe him. The next day, they set out south from Rickett. Luke constantly glared at Rudius now, and did his very best to ensure that he wasn't alone with Ariel. He probably thought that Rudius would murder the princess and send her head to Grabble, now that she had publicly declared that he'd never be a noble. That's an interesting, conclusion to come to, Rudius didn't mind, really. He knew what was going on in Luke's head, and Ariel had him on a leash. It was one less thing to worry about. One other thing that took place that day, Ariel told Ghislaine and Edis what she had learned about Saros' death. So all in all, it seems quite likely that a member of my faction played a key role in the downfall of Lord Saros. I see. Humph. Ghislaine listened with cold anger in her eyes. Edis made a show of looking disinterested, but you could see through it easily enough. She squeezed the pommel of her sword so tightly, all the blood ran from her fingers. Finally, a sign that she actually is annoyed by this, that she's angered by this. So doesn't help that she doesn't like Ariel right now because she got so much praise earlier, and now she's saying that literally she got involved with her grandfather's death. That's not good. Are you going to cut me down, Ghislaine? No, I'll kill enemies you've offered me. Ghislaine didn't seem too fixated on murdering Palmon in particular. Reese expected this to require some persuasion, but maybe she thought this through in her own way. Edis didn't say anything at the moment, but then nodded slightly. Sounds good. I'm willing to kill anyone who might cause Rudius trouble. Never change, Edis. The remaining goal was to reach the capital and have their showdown with the enemy. Over the course of 20 days, they made their way south along the back roads, finally arriving at Ars, the crown jewel of Asra. And that is chapter 6. Right there. Let's stop it right there. Isn't that a great time to stop? I don't know. I don't know if it goes right into Ars and then the Grill capital and right into the conflict, but I'm guessing this is technically, I would assume this is going to be a really good stopping point because I'm going to assume that things are going to get crazy from here on out, but we'll see. But yeah, there's this later part of here is very interesting because Ghislaine, why would she be so kind of open to this idea? I think there's a side of me that kind of believes that Ghislaine, in essentially being Ariel's bodyguard, no, she's not going to cut her down because this is what she has chosen to do. I am going to protect Ariel. And then yes, because hearing that kind of conflicts with what she's already kind of established with wanting to avenge Saros. I wonder if she has a conflict there that she can't strike down Ariel because she's working for Ariel now, even though she's tied in with the death of the person that she's trying to avenge. I don't know. At the same time, I guess there might be I'm sort of curious about the idea of Rudius' connection with Palmon, if that might make her hesitate to kill Palmon. But I don't think so. I think Ghislaine knows that Rudius has zero cares about Palmon. I don't think that she would think that Rudius would care at all about her striking him down. And even still, she could probably ask him, do you care? Do you want me not to kill him? Tell me and I won't kill him. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that she's pivoted here to really say, I'll kill who you offer me. Like, it is almost that idea of giving, I just want you figure it out. Show me who to kill, You figure it out. I'll exact the justice that Saros needs, but I'm gonna let you do all the thinking and figure out exactly who caused it, because I can't figure it out. I think from Gilane's perspective, it's like, I can't figure it out. She's figuring it out for me. It sort of implied that with the extra chapter in volume 16, is this idea of she's gonna lead me to where I need to go. That works great. I don't have to think about it. I'm gonna protect these people, and she'll show me who to kill. So yeah. Anyways, that's again, great set of chapters. I actually talked about a lot of stuff more than I thought I would. I think that a lot of great stuff around, again, the Fatoa region, all that stuff was fantastic. A little bit of insight into geography, the bandits, and all that kind of stuff is great. And yes, these great moments of Ariel just stepping up and handling the situation is really fantastic. But yeah, still, I'm going to say it again. A little bit of an anticlimactic reveal about Luke. But again, I don't think that's it. I don't think it's either that wasn't everything that he's done with the Man God, or he's going to get another visit. And I think right now, Luke has so much distrust for Rudius and so much anger at him, because everything is playing out like the Man God said, and thus he has to believe what the Man God said, that it's going to take one more push. And again, it's going to go back to, I think they're flagging it with them, mentioning the idea that it happened with Rudius. When you're no longer useful, he cuts you loose and makes you do something reckless, do something crazy, set him off, essentially. So anyhow, that's it for this Mushoku Monday. Hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Again, hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for you guys' support through kind words, sharing this out, just being here, watching the premiere, or watching the video afterwards. Appreciate those guys as well. Additionally, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means so much to me that you guys part with your hard-earned money in order to support this and keep things going. Honestly, without you guys, this would never happen. This would have been gone a long time ago, but we're going on 2 years now, and it's just been a fun blast going through this. More rewarding to me than anybody else. But with all that said, with all the mushy stuff gone, until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. They were brought to a lone catum, and they were brought to a lone cat. Who was L? Oh, Luke. Ariel then asked Triss to help them by testifying to what as household tutors. Ariel was still maintaining her It doesn't feel like you were born to be a swordmaster either.